What's up? It's Mr.Tryhard, and today we will be
Hi,
reacting
Oddings. It's your Ate
to
Sapphire.
something scary.
After this episode,
it's Snarled. That's the channel. That's the YouTube channel name, and we're just gonna be reacting to some videos of my little bit right here, and let's get it.
you can hear 4 more stories over on the Something Scary podcast, available for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. The link.
Oh yeah, and by the way, guys, I don't know why, but I got a strike on my video on my sub for sub stream because YouTube said it was a inappropriate video, and it said it was spam, so I don't know. But it doesn't matter. Let's get to the video.
Do this in memory of me. Our first chapter is inspired by a true story submitted by Audie. Recently, they stayed with their tia in Mexico, and when they asked her to make her famous pozole, this is what she told them. I will never eat pozole again. There's a church in my neighborhood that I've been going to every Sunday for the past year or so. And after every Mass, all of the members move next door to the hall where free lunch is served. Every week, it's the same delicious pozole, a traditional red stew with pork and vegetables. And it's all prepared and provided by Lupe Espinoza, a kind young woman. Lupe had been involved in the church long before I became a member. She was the most dedicated Catholic I had ever met. She ran the youth group and food drives and volunteered all over the city. After every Mass, she would give an individual greeting to every single person and memorized everybody's name. Everybody practically worshipped her, especially her husband, Eduardo. He was also involved in the community, but even he knew he wasn't as beloved as Lupe. Personally, I was always slightly creeped out by how intense they were. Lupe never broke eye contact with you when you were speaking, and Eduardo treated Lupe like she was a god. His wife seemed to be his proudest achievement. But they both did so much good in the community, it felt wrong to think ill of them, even though they both seemed a little off. One thing was for sure, their pozole was divine. One Sunday, I woke up late and forgot to eat breakfast before heading to Mass. My stomach was gurgling through the whole service, and it only got worse during the transubstantiation, which is when the priest turns the bread and wine into the body and blood of Jesus.
Take this, all of you, and drink from it. This is my blood.
In Catholicism, we believe that an actual transformation happens in that moment. That is actually Jesus' body and blood that we are about to consume. We believe that it brings us closer to God.
Do this in memory of me.
The second Mass was over, I rushed over to the hall to get in line for food. Maybe it was because I was extra hungry that day, but the pozole was even better than I remembered. I had always prided myself for my cooking skills, especially my own pozole recipe, but the Espinosas had me beat. I decided to ask Lupe about it. Your pozole is the best I've ever had. What's your secret? Lupe stared into my eyes, smiled, and delicately placed a hand on my shoulder. Just God's love. The following Sunday, I went to Mass as usual. But the Mass was not as usual. It was a memorial service for Lupe. During the week, the youth group went on one of those home building trips, like Habitat for Humanity, and a large metal crossbeam fell right on top of Lupe. It would have slammed right into 3 teenagers, but Lupe pushed them out of the way. After the service, everybody congregated in the hall. Once everybody had a bowl of soup in their hands, Eduardo addressed the crowd. Thank you all for coming. My wife loved all of you very much. Please, raise your bowls. Take this, all of you, and drink it. To Lupe. Everybody took a sip. We all took our seats and continued to eat the pozole. But it tasted a little different. Not worse, just different, which made me realize that Lupe was probably the better chef, not Eduardo. I was nearing the bottom of my bowl, so I picked it up and slurped the rest. All that was left was a small chunk of meat. I went to stab it with my fork, but it was surprisingly tough. I continued to stab it, and in doing so realized that it was a thumb. A goddamn human thumb with a bone still inside. I screamed and immediately started gagging. I threw the thumb onto the table. Everyone around me gasped in horror and disbelief. I turned to Eduardo and shouted, "What did you feed us?" He simply stared back, raised his hands, and said, "She died for others. Do this in memory of her." You're insane. What the hell is wrong with you? Oh my God. Angry shouts echoed throughout the hall as people began vomiting everywhere. We held Eduardo in that room until the police came. I didn't do anything wrong. You should be grateful. We're all closer to God. Want more Something Scary? You can hear 4 more stories over on the Something Scary podcast, available for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. The links are in the description below. If you'd like to submit a story, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Like and share this.
Oh my God, stupid ad.
Wait.
I've been seeing illegal legend ads all day. I swear. I've not seen that. Oh my God.
Whoa.
I've not seen one different ad.
Hi, Oddings. It's your Ate Sapphire. If you want to listen to the extended version of this episode, the link is in the description. Chalva. Our first chapter is inspired by...
We're gonna move. Hold up, guys. We're about to move real quick. No, I need these. Hey.
How? You're inside your mom and dad's room. They're not even using. Oh, what's the ball? Oh, your nuts or your balls on my pillow.
Alright, let's get it.
True events that happened to Gaurav from India. This happened when I was about 11 years old and lived with my 17-year-old sister Manika and my grandmother. I was sitting at the table eating dinner with my grandma when Manika quickly rushed inside. "You're home late," Grandma commented, but Manika didn't respond. Grandma called over to her to join us for dinner, but she just walked right past us and straight to her room. "Teenagers, so moody," Grandma said. I was pretty close to my sister. We weren't that far apart in age, and we could usually talk about anything. She did have a tendency to be moody, but I could feel that something was different about tonight. So after dinner, I gently knocked on her door and asked if everything was okay. "I just need to be alone right now." I shrugged and headed to my own room, followed by our family dog, Snoopy. I laid in bed, but was having a hard time falling asleep. I felt really anxious and restless for some reason. I didn't understand why. Hours went by, and I had given up on trying to fall asleep. I decided to take Snoopy out for a 3 a.m. walk. The neighborhood was quiet and calm. Snoopy was happily sniffing around. Then I heard a rustling from a bush a couple meters in front of us. From the bushes emerged what looked like a mangy black dog. There were a lot of strays in this part of town, so I wasn't too surprised and continued forward. But Snoopy wasn't moving. I looked down and was shocked to see him low on the ground, sneering. "It's just a dog, Snoop," I said as I yanked on his leash. But Snoopy was not budging. His sneering turned into growling. I looked back towards the stray dog and watched as the dark figure stood up, reaching its full height. That was no dog.
Oh my gosh.
At this point, Snoopy was barking wildly at the creature. I pulled his leash and ran in the opposite direction. I could hear the booming footsteps of that thing chasing after us.
Why don't you play with me?
It asked tauntingly. I refused to turn around or speak to it.
No, I can't do that, bro. I can't do that, bro.
Never
I'll
engage
get
with a
crying
spirit
that
that's trying to
moment.
get your attention.
I'll break his ankles,
That's how
push
you
him on the
invite
ground, and then run.
So I just kept running. Snoopy followed closely by my
I couldn't
side.
do that.
Luckily, my neighborhood had a lot of temples, almost one every 200 meters. I ran towards one of them and slammed the door shut behind me. I waited and listened. The footsteps outside slowed down and came to a halt. "I'll come back for you." I fell to the ground and caught my breath. Snoopy and I stayed there until the sun rose. When we got back to our house, my grandmother and sister were already at the dining room table eating breakfast. I saw something last night. It was this thing. It was chasing us. I was struggling to find the words to describe what I saw, but even then, my grandmother knew what it was. You didn't talk to it, did you? No, of course not. But, Grandma, what was that? It was most likely a chalava. It means illusionist or a shapeshifter. They're created when an unborn child dies and the respected ceremonies aren't performed. And since the child's spirit couldn't take a good earthly form, they inhabit whatever form they can. Usually, a malicious one. Manika covered her mouth. This seemed to really be upsetting her. Where did you see the chalava? Grandma asked. Out by that field where the stray dogs usually are. Ah, that makes sense. There used to be a hospital over there. It was shut down when they discovered that a doctor was performing unauthorized abortions. Manika burst into tears. What's wrong, Manika? You've been acting so strangely lately. That chalava? It's my fault. I'm so sorry, Gorov. Manika ran back to her room. My grandma told me that she was just being moody, but it wasn't until a few years later that I fully understood what had happened that night. Want more something scary? You can listen to the extended version of this episode on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. The link is in the description below. Like and share this video if it gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe to Snarled and turn on the bell for notifications. And if you dare, follow me on social media. Until next time, sweet dreams.
This is our last one, guys, alright? Finally, a different ad.
Hi, welcome to Hertz Car Sales. How can I help you?
Ma'am, I'm here to help.
Hi, audience. It's your Ate Sapphire. Welcome to Something Scary.
You guys
If you want to
skip this.
listen to the extended version...
It is her showing herself.
Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? Code Siren.
Ooh.
The following is inspired by a true story from Alex, whose father, Vasil, served in the Bulgarian People's Army in 1982. Vasil was 18 when he was sent for 2 years of military service, starting in 1982. He was dispatched to a border post along the defensive line between Bulgaria and Turkey. His job was border guard, and his main duty was to patrol the electrified border fence. Mostly, it was to make sure nobody left the country during a time of severe restriction of movement under the communist government. His orders were to shoot on sight. No exceptions. One night, he and his best friend Ivan were patrolling the border as usual with their dog. Ivan was a far senior soldier, much larger and stronger than Vasil, with a kind of look only veteran soldiers had. He described the night as still and cold, and the moon shone through the clear sky during the night. There was a light breeze that whistled faintly across the open plains between the two borders. All was well and normal, and their routine patrol was near their end. Much like most days, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and the two men started to make their way back to the camp. They were almost back to base when, all of a sudden, Ivan stopped. He turned his head to the darkness. Do you hear that? Vasil stopped to listen, and his eyes widened as he heard what sounded like singing. The two men listened and listened as the singing continued and seemingly became louder. Vasil stood still, yearning to know who was singing so beautifully. Then, their dog started to growl, softly at first, until it started barking furiously as the singing came closer and closer. Ivan grabbed Vasil. Listen to me very carefully, he said. I need you to run back to checkpoint B, get on the radio, and call for reinforcements. Tell them code siren. They'll know what you mean. What? Why? Do as I say, do you understand? All this over some singing? This isn't the Turks or the Americans. This is much more serious than that. Now go! By this time, the singing had become so loud it was almost unnerving, as if the source was as close as a few meters away. Vasil looked around in panic, gripping his rifle in fear and confusion. Vasil started to run. He knew that the checkpoint was less than a kilometer away and that he could make it there in a few minutes if he really ran for it. Behind him, he heard the barking and the growling of their dog change into whimpers and cries, which was followed by bursts of automatic fire that ripped through the night air. The fire sustained until he had finally reached the radio at the checkpoint. Checkpoint B to base. Checkpoint B to base. We have a
Trash. Alright guys, okay. Thank you for watching the video. I don't know if you guys saw, but I know you saw. I kind of fell asleep like 3 times in a video. And if you guys like the video, please subscribe. And bye.